ancient cultures have always observed the sky. And that's pretty much the one thing that all cultures have had in common, is the sky is available to them at night, and they wondered about its place in relation to them, and a lot of them made many uses of it. And I'm going to just focus on one part of that, the Milky Way. Before light pollution, it was visible to everybody very prominently. And in the southern hemisphere, which I'll get to in most of this presentation, it's especially prominent and used by certain cultures. So I'll start out talking about the Milky Way, and then I'll give a few North America examples with the Native Americans, and then I'll talk about examples from Argentina, Australia, and Peru, and then do a little comparison. So we're going to explore the fascination with the darkness in the Milky Way, and through comparisons get common themes, inspirations, why these cultures saw what they did, what we're getting at in the Milky Way, especially when we get onto the dark constellations. In the billions of stars that we look at, when we look at the Milky Way, there's some parts of it that are obscured by interstellar gas and dust, or make dark patches in the Milky Way. And similarly to the societies, the cultures that saw constellations or figures between stars, certain cultures also saw constellations or figures in these dark spots in the Milky Way. In the southern sky, the southern hemisphere is amazing at night. The Milky Way, they're just blessed with an especially prominent portion of it, and that you'll see some examples of here in a few minutes. So there, and that's that same section of the southern Milky Way I'm talking about. You can see that it has some rather distinct dark patches in it. And we'll talk more about those in a little bit as we go along, and what some societies saw in that they worked into their cosmologies. We know this is the Southern Cross, and that's kind of a central orientation point for that part of the Milky Way. This dark spot here in Western astronomy, we call it the coal sack, is pretty much the only part of those dark spots that we paid a lot of attention to in Western astronomy, not exclusively, but it's most prominent. And the coal sack we're talking about is right here, the Southern Cross is here, and then again, these spots that I will show you a little more detail about in a couple of minutes. Another view. Anyway, many civilizations have been fascinated with the Milky Way. And the three primary ones I'll focus on were the Aborigines of Australia, the Incas of Peru, and the Mokovi of Argentina. But first, I said we're going to talk about just a few examples from North America. They didn't see the same dark sky figures, but they used it in their cosmologies. The Maya and the Milky Way for them played a central role in a reenaction of creation, and it relates to what they knew as the world tree that reaches from the earth to the sky. So on August 13th, February 5th, the sky goes through a cycle from sunset to sunrise. It corresponds with the story of the transition from the Maya's third creation to the present one. So when the Milky Way runs along a north-south axis like this, it is what they think of as the world tree. The Aztecs, when the sky was created, a path was worn through the stars that was the Milky Way, and the path is said to have been created on the first day of the first year. A little further to the north, the Apache and Navajo, the road to the afterworld is symbolized by the Milky Way, a trail made by departing spirits. The Pawnee spoke of the Milky Way as buffalo dust. Priests knew it as the pathway of departed spirits. And the Milky Way was the channel between worlds. For the Sioux, souls traveled along the Ghost Road, which is the Milky Way, and the light in the Milky Way represents campfires of ghosts on the road. But now getting down into the southern hemisphere in Argentina, the Mokovi inhabit the southern area of the Chaco region, and the Milky Way holds many meanings for them, somewhat dependent on who's narrating the story. The Milky Way is used as a temporal marker in their they're able to indicate its direction both several times throughout the year, different times of the night. Milky Way world expectations appear to be connected to the anticipation of astronomical signs, among which a new position of the Milky Way is most frequently mentioned. The Milky Way changes its orientation from one part of the year to another, from one part of the night to another, and that's what certain societies made quite note of and use of. So for the Milky Way, a special animal of a species may be the master of that species. So for them, the maniac is the master of the South American rheas. Rheas are birds distantly related to the emu and ostrich. In their cosmology, a mythical tale has it that a powerful man decided to face this maniac. He chased it throughout the world, and then the cornered maniac climbed up the Ambu trunk, which is the tree of the world, to the sky. Today, the shadow soul of the maniac can be seen in the Milky Way's dark clouds with its head in what we know as the coal sack. And the stars that we know as Alpha and Beta Centauri are dogs chasing the maniac and bite at its neck. So here is this southern portion of the Milky Way that will keep recurring. The maniac's head here is at the coal sack, and trailing behind is the body that they saw in this part of the Milky Way. And there's the rhea that was meant to represent. The Australian Milky Way. In Australia, from March to October, the Milky Way, it can be an amazing sight, again, because of the southern hemisphere. Before light pollution, Aboriginal people had a perfect view of the Milky Way every clear moonless night, and it took a key role in their knowledge of the sky. It was widely recognized by a number of early Australian cultures, and although their interpretations of it can vary greatly. Many groups see the Milky Way as a celestial river, and the dark patches of the Milky Way are sometimes said to be water holes inhabited by monsters. For them, dark spaces within the Milky Way are as significant as bright objects. And two animals symbolically linked Bora ceremonies to these dark spaces. One was a spiritual serpent, commonly referred to as the rainbow serpent, traced out by Milky Way dust lanes. The other was an emu, which is also traced by dust in the Milky Way. The emu was an important part of the Bora ceremony in Southeast Australia because male emus brood and hatch the emu chicks and rear the young. This is symbolic of the initiation of adolescent boys by their male elders in the culture. So a dark constellation well known by the Aboriginal groups is the emu in the sky. The dark cloud of the Milky Way, again that we know as the coal sack, forms the head of the emu, and its body and legs continue across the adjacent part of the galaxy. And there's a rock art engraving in the Coringa Chase National Park depicting a similar emu, and the emu in the sky aligns above it during the season for emu egg laying. Bora sites are sacred places in which Aboriginal young males were initiated. And the Bora ceremonial grounds tend to display an orientation to the celestial emu in the south-southwest. To the Wardaman people, the coal sack, the head of a lawman, was the head of a lawman, but many others, it was the head of the emu. And as I mentioned before, the emu is the best known Aboriginal constellation made from the dark clouds in the Milky Way. The coal sack forms the head, and the body extends along the body of the Milky Way through the constellations that we know as Scorpius and Sagittarius. There's an emu. You can see that in some ways it looks similar to the rhea that we looked at a few minutes ago. So here is the emu, his head up by the coal sack, and this is stretching across the same section of the Milky Way that the Milky saw from Argentina. And here's some examples of the different orientations of the Milky Way at different times, and they use this in their cultural beliefs, cosmologies. the female emu is chasing a mate, the male emu incubating eggs, and the eggs hatching, the male emus rearing the young. Emus sitting in water holes in late spring. They used this to create a whole great story for their cultural history. Here's just a comparison of the rhea and the emu. Both large flightless birds, large feathered bodies. Emu is a little taller. Emu has a tuft of hair on his head, and the rhea has no head hair. And the rhea is native to South America, and the emu to Australia. Another Australian dark sky constellation, the kangaroo in the sky, is below the emu, and is described as being beneath the emu in the sky toward the emu's tail. There's the emu was up here, and there's the kangaroo in the sky. Down below it, certain of the cultures there saw and observed and used that. And one other dark constellation found with the Aboriginal Australians is the crocodiles in the sky. The crocodiles don't become visible in the Milky Way until late summer. First the kangaroo comes along. First the kangaroo and the emu have already come along, disappeared, and then the crocodiles appear in their place. And there's the kangaroo would be up here, the emu up here, and here's the crocodiles. So now we'll move to Peru, and well, actually the Andes Mountains between Colombia and Argentina, for the Inca Empire. The Incas, at least from the records we have, probably had the best overall usage of this section of the Milky Way. The Andeans recognized several dark constellations, and again, like I said, these dark spots are formed by interstellar gas and dust blocking the light from the bright stars behind them. And the Incas, like the other cultures, saw these great cosmological characters meant to influence their daily lives. Now, after the Spanish conquest, the Spaniards attempted to define the Andean astronomy in European terms that were familiar to them, but not really taking into account the Incas viewed the cosmos from an entirely different perspective. European astronomy followed a zodiac that centered around the ecliptic, but the Incas oriented their sky by the Milky Way. The Incas saw the Milky Way as a river flowing across the night sky in a very literal sense. They saw earthly waters as being drawn into the heavens, and then later returned to Earth after a celestial rejuvenation by rain in the mountains. The Earth was thought to float in a cosmic ocean, and when the celestial river's orientation was such that it dipped into that ocean, the waters were drawn up into the sky. The Milky Way is therefore an integral part of the continuing recycling of water throughout the Quechua universe. For orientation and quadripartition, the Milky Way passes brightly overhead. The Incas saw it as two separate rivers due to the Earth's rotation and the Milky Way's alternating position on the horizon every 12 hours. The plane of the Milky Way is inclined between 26 and 30 degrees, with the axis of the Earth's rotation. The orientation is 26 degrees toward the south celestial pole and 30 degrees toward the north. The Milky Way at times is viewed rising in the southeast, passing through the zenith and setting in the northwest, but 12 hours later, the horizon positions have shifted, and the band of stars rises from the northeast, traveling again through the zenith, but now setting in the southwest. This 24-hour rotation cycle creates two zenith intersecting cardinal axes that divide the celestial sphere into four observable quarters. And that's a drawing that was made by a colleague that depicts this quadripartition and the way that the Incas saw the sky divided into four quarters. The Milky Way rises figured prominently because of the correlations with the intercardinal axes and 4 points of solstice horizon events. At the time of the December solstice, when the sun rises in Peru at 114 degrees on the horizon, the evening position of the band of the Milky Way lies similarly to the southeast, During the June solstice sunrise at 64 degrees, the Milky Way is situated in like fashion in the northeast. The times of the solstices are the only times that the sun rises and travels with the Milky Way, so that help underscore the prominence that the Incas found with it. Inca cosmology recognizes that both the celestial river and the sun rise together at the dry seasons beginning in June at the solstice, and the rainy seasons start in December at the solstice, and sometimes uses this correlation to explain the seasonal intensity of the sun, which feeds upon the powerful waters. They ordered the sky by this quadripartition, in contrast with use of the ecliptic like we did in Europe, which we drew from the Babylonians. This gave the Incas a nearly 90-degree difference in their perspective of the heavens and the cosmological constructs that they developed. The Incas believed the waters of the celestial river originated in the sun. The Vilcanota River, flowing through the Sacred Valley and north of Cusco, flows northwest past Machu Picchu and beyond, and its waters were thought to rise into the Milky Way, and once having traveled the celestial course, fall to the earth again as rain. The Milky Way is a heavenly reflection of the Vilcanota. The Octopada was a site discovered in 2003. It's a line for the June solstice sun, rediscovered it. I mean, it had been there forever. It was totally engulfed in the cloud forest. So my slides got a little mixed up here. Anyway, back to the dark constellations. I'll get back to the Octopada in a moment. The Milky Way provided visual inspiration for several themes of Inca cosmology. The Incas recognized dark constellations, or the shapes of beings formed by dark clouds. And they stretch across nearly 150 degrees of the Milky Way's expanse. The Incas believed that the animal constellations are responsible for the procreation, augmentation of their animal counterparts on the Earth. They're most visible at the time of the March equinox. During the September equinox, the fewest will be seen since they've since rotated to be beneath the horizon for much of the night. And as I said, at the solstices, the Milky Way briefly aligns with the horizon points for the sunrise and sunset. Now this is up at the Octopada, and the reason I point this out is when I was doing many research trips, on this particular one we were there, and my research assistant Carlos knew the Inca Milky Way very well. Took a green laser pointer like this one and gave me just an unforgettable tour. And that's what first created my fascination with what the Incas believed in the sky. Here's sort of their pantheon of creatures. It begins with Makakai, the serpent, and then Hanpatu, a toad, Utu is a bird, Mother Yama, a baby Yama, Atok, the fox, and another Utu, the bird, that rise and set and follow along this direction. The first, Makakai, the serpent, serpents figure prominently in Inca cosmology. The Incas had three primary sacred creatures: the condor for the sky, the Puma for the ground, the here and now, and the serpent for the underworld below. Hanpatu, the toad, follows closely behind. Toads were thought of as bad omens as they were created by the devil. Utu, the tinamu, is a bird indigenous to the Andes, and it follows the toad near the center of the dark constellations. Yakana is the Yama, the mother Yama, and that was the first one that Carlos showed to me. Figures prominently in many aspects of Inca culture. The celestial figure was thought to animate the Yamas on the earth. Wrong photo again. Below the Yakana is a small dark constellation called Unya Yamaka, which is said to be a baby Yama suckling its mother. And after that is Atok the fox, which lies on the ecliptic between the constellations that we know as Scorpio and Sagittarius. And then another Utu, the Tinamu, a second one that follows the fox. So here's a drawing that was made by Gary Urton, who was one of the earliest researchers and publishers. He lived in a rural, remote Inca village as an anthropologist and learned much of this information from those people who descended from the Incas. In the Coricancha, which would have been the Inca Sun Temple in Cusco, there's now a museum, and they have this painting of the sky there, with a diagram of it describing it. So there, again, there's the serpent, and the toad, and the fox, the mother llama, the baby llama. Here would be the fox in the second YouTube. Something really threw my slides off because I didn't put those pictures in those spots. This is supposed to be a nice comparison of the three different cultures. With, I have to apologize. I'm not sure what happened there. But anyway, the same section of the sky. This actually, it says the matic, that's the emu. The mother llama, baby llama should be here, and the emu should be there. And well, there's the mother llama, the baby llama, and the maniac, where it should be a picture of M83, the spiral galaxy at Hydra, and M20, the Trident Nebula, that I put there because I'm very proud of my wife, who's a gifted artist, who drew these Milky Way, or painted the Milky Way for me here, but she did some other paintings as well. These really migrated. And then I just throw this in here at the end because at my university we've now started a program for those wanting to learn more about archaeoastronomy and how to do this kind of research. Here's some of the courses that we're offering on the graduate level. Well, there's her painting of the Trident Nebula. It just really, and that was her painting of the spiral galaxy and Hydra, and those are not photos, they're paintings. And there's the undergraduate courses that we plan to offer. Future development, if we want to incorporate courses for Native American astronomy.